Thank you all so much for joining today and welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. Happy New Year to everyone. I'm so excited to kick off the first one of 2022 with you all and to have Ian Anderson joining us here for his first time as well. But just to introduce the Data Science Hangout for anyone who's joining us for the first time, the Data Science Hangout's an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and really just what's going on in the world of data science. So if you ever want to go back and rewatch these or some of the ones that we had in 2021 or share with someone who's missed it, they'll be recorded and shared up to YouTube as well. But we really want this to be a space where everybody can participate and we want to hear from everyone. So there's a few different ways you can ask questions during the session today. So you can jump in live, you can raise your hand on Zoom, put questions in the Zoom chat. Feel free to put a little star next to your question too if you want me to read it out loud. Otherwise, I can just call on you to introduce yourself and jump in. But we'll also have a Slido link too where you can ask questions anonymously, and I think Tyler will share that in the chat in just a second here. But without all that, I'm so happy to be joined by my co-host for today, Ian Anderson. Ian's the Director of Hockey Analytics at the Philadelphia Flyers. And Ian, I'd love to start by maybe having you jump in and introduce yourself and share a bit about your team and the work that you do.
Hello, everybody, first of all, and thank you for having me. I'm also excited to be here and talk about all things data science, sports, Flyers, whatever people want to do. Basically, I've been with the Flyers now since 2014, had a variety of different titles or roles, I guess, over that time. I guess I don't know how deep you want to get into it, or if it was one of your questions, if I'm jumping ahead, but I can expand on what I've done. Started as a kind of team of one. I started in 2014 in hockey. As I don't know who the participants are today and what their experience level is with the sport, but I was the third full-time analytics staff member in our sport hired at that time. And then there was a rash of hirings during the 2014 summer. But now that's widespread across the sport. So I'm expanding my team currently. We'll be a team of 6 very soon. So that's the general overview, I guess, for today.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, as we're waiting for some questions to come in from everyone, I think that would be really helpful to expand on how you kind of started this small team and how you've grown over the past few years too.
Yeah. So a little bit of my backstory too is I was working for the Washington Capitals in the NHL in a different role, starting in around 2007. So from 2007 to 14, I was in more of an operations role embedded within the team. And I just kind of noticed that we didn't have anybody at that time during those years like doing this type of work, and it was being done in other sports. And I just kind of realized like maybe this is something we should be doing, and I kind of asked, they said, sure, you want to do it kind of thing. And I was like, well, I don't know how anything about this, like technically speaking, right? How to code, or I didn't go to school for that. That's not what I did. So another piece I'll share is I'm a self-taught programmer. I got my master's through Northwestern's master's of predictive analytics, it was called at the time. I believe they changed the program since then, but there might be some people on this call that are from that program as well. Taught myself how to do it, and then again that led me to the Flyers. So that's kind of my backstory, but I don't know how much more you want to get into that.
That's amazing. So you just said, hey, we should be doing this, and just started to learn it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I talked with somebody and I was like, maybe I should go work in baseball. And the person's like, wait a second. So there's nobody doing this in the league. There's nobody with these skills. Like, why are you trying to leave? Like, you should be doing that there. It's kind of the advice I got. And I was like, you know what? That's a good piece of advice. So I just did some research. And back in 2014, there weren't a lot of programs too. That's another thing I wanted to like share with people is like, here we are, we just started 2022. And one thing that's amazing to me about this industry, and especially about sports analytics in general, is like, it wasn't that long ago. Like, we all lose track of how fast this is moving, and 8 years is not a huge amount of time. It is in some cases, and in some cases it's not. And so to see kind of how things have expanded and going through the hiring process now, seeing the applicants and the level of their skills over the 8-year period is like, it's exponential growth, you know? So again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll leave it at that.
I imagine there's a few people on the call too who might work in industries that are pretty new to using data science and could possibly be in a similar position. So I'm curious if you have any tips for going about like starting that program up or convincing people that you need it.
I think what I will say is I have a lot of experience on this. Again, I got dropped into an organization with no infrastructure, no data pipeline, no anything, right? It was just like, here you go, you figure this all out, one person, right? And so what you realize very quickly, as I'm sure everybody here can attest to, is you can't do this you just work by yourself. It's a team. This is all done by a team of people. And anyone that is doing it by themselves, my hat goes, I tip my hat to you, because it's a lot to be knowledgeable across all areas, right? So I guess like my piece of advice I give people, because I do have people talk to me, various teams and are different stages of developing their program, right? Is I just tell them like that what has worked for me is just creating like a very small reproducible example of work, or starting very small with a project that you can deliver, right? And even if it's not the best or what you would consider the best, just give people something that they can see and touch and feel, right? And then they get to start using or seeing how it improves their lives. Like sometimes the products we make is just making our coworkers' lives easier and automating some tasks or things like that, right? So do something that people could see that makes their life better, that they enjoy. And then they say, wow, this is awesome, great work. And then you say, okay, you like that, like here's where we want to go next. And here's why we need to expand the team, because we could be doing more in X, Y, Z, these areas, right? So instead of trying to do like everything all at once, is just like start with one small thing and then build on that. Like kind of like taking a long-term approach, I guess, would be the best.
That's super helpful.
Yeah.
Zach, I see you're kicking off the questions in the chat, and I'd love to turn it over to you to have you ask it.
Okay, so first of all, I don't know much about hockey. I've never watched a game, but I do follow the NFL. And I'm sure you're aware that they do the Big Data Bowl submissions today, which I have submitted a project if you're interested in seeing. But my question more about is, I see that Megan, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, which is really bad, has a Big Data Cup in March, end of March. And I was wondering if like there was other hockey equivalents of the Big Data Bowl where you can get like normal data that's hidden away from the public, that's available to see what the public can do with it.
Yeah, this is something I'm extremely interested in. Keep track of myself, obviously, because the tracking data that you see in the Big Data Bowl that the NFL is doing, we have, our league has been working on the exact same technology for years. And it's finally this year, so this October of 2021, was rolled out league-wide. It's in every game, every team, everything in the NHL now. So that being said, we're obviously a couple of years behind the NFL, but I could see the NHL potentially doing something similar here in the next year or two. So I'd be on the lookout for that. That being said, there was a Big Data Cup is what it was called, playing on that same idea, run by a company called Stathletes, which is a data provider to various different hockey leagues. And they did their first one within the last few months. I don't remember the date, so I apologize. But within the last, like, say 6 months, they did something similar where they released their data that they have, their company produces, and they asked people to create a project similar to the Big Data Bowl. So you guys can Google that, and everyone can figure that out themselves offline. But again, that's year one, right? They've only done it one time. I imagine they'll probably try to do it again, and it'll expand and get better. So anyone that is looking to do hockey work similar to Big Data Bowl, the NFL is rolling out. It's coming. I imagine it'll get better and better. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, we're talking about the same thing. Yeah, Megan's one of the co-founders.
Yep, there you go. Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Ian, I see there's an anonymous question, and this has come up in some of the R and sports analytics conversations too. But the question is, sports teams feel like such an interesting but difficult type of organization to break into. How do you get into that world, and what's so unique about the industry?
Oh, yeah, great question. I have a ton of mixed feelings on this question. Again, when I started years and years and years ago, like people always, the first thing they want to ask you, which is a relevant question, I understand why they're asking, is like, how did you get in? Like, but the problem I have, and it always makes me cringe answering the question and trying not to avoid it, is like, this is a totally different world today than what I got into. So my story is so irrelevant now that if I told you, it's not reproducible, you know, to use a data science question. Like I can't reproduce what I did then now, it's not possible. In saying that, the piece of advice I would offer people today and the benefit that they have today is that there are all these great programs like Big Data Bowl, Big Data Cup, 𝐤𝐳 expanding, obviously. Like there's so many different platforms, even our studio, like all the different tools that have been developed for people to showcase their work, Shiny apps, you name it, right? Like there's GT table contest. Like there's so many ways to build a portfolio today that there wasn't even a few years ago. So it's all out there for you to build your own portfolio. And like I said, I'm passionate about this because I'm literally in the middle of hiring right now. And there's just like no excuse not to have a portfolio now. Like there's so much you could be doing. So I would just tell people, do the job you want. And that starts now. Like you could be doing the job now. And it's going to require some extra attention outside of work hours maybe and things like that, but it's all doable. So that's the easiest piece of advice, I guess.
Thank you. And to expand on that a bit more, would you mind sharing a little bit of info on the roles you're hiring for?
Yeah, sure. I posted 3 different roles. So I'm taking my team now, which is myself. I have an assistant director, and he's like head of my backend data engineering pipelines and things like that. And I have an analyst on my staff right now as well. We're trying to double the size of our team. Hiring another quantitative analyst who, oddly enough, in this conversation is likely going to focus a lot of their time on the player tracking that I just mentioned that is similar to the Big Data Bowl stuff. And then also another backend engineer, developer to work closely with the one that I currently have, because that is growing in scope, right? And then the third position will be TBD. It might be a software developer, something front end. Haven't decided yet, but that's what I've posted as, and those are the applications I'm looking through currently.
Cool, thank you. And when you just mentioned like there's no excuse for someone to not have a portfolio, is that something that you like sometimes come across and actively looking for people, or is that just on resumes that people send?
I think it's both, you know what I mean? Like if you want to take that a step further and like a lot of people have done, put some of that stuff out in the public sphere, then people will find it. Like if it's good enough, people will find it. We're always constantly looking, and people love to share good work, and it's amazing the network effects of Twitter and LinkedIn or whatever it might be. You know, I was actively reading a paper I saw on LinkedIn from a connection from years ago who's doing some work in the Bundesliga soccer, right? He did something on passing, modeling passing efficiency and stuff like that. So I'm reading that paper right now. Like that could be your paper, you know what I mean? I could be reading it right now. That's something that you've done and some work that you've done, or something in a Big Data Bowl. When I have time, I try to go through a lot of those submissions and see what people are doing, what ideas can you borrow and steal and things like that. And also just see the type of work people are doing. It's the easiest way to really find good work.
Definitely. Robert, I see you asked a question you said I can read out loud. So the question, Ian, was, does knowing analytics at the level of depth that you do impact your ability to enjoy watching sports?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The only thing I'll say on that is this is your job, right? And I'm passionate about it. It's all consuming doing this type of work. Obviously, there's no days off, right, kind of, because like sports don't stop, right? Like when you do your 9 to 5, you go Monday through Friday, but like we play games Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, you name it. So it has to be something you're passionate about. That's another thing I tell people, like this has to be the thing you think about constantly. I think about it in the shower, I think about it at dinner, I think about it all the time, not because I have to, but just it's what I enjoy, right? So you should be doing what you're passionate about. But in saying that, I haven't cheered at a sporting event and I can't even remember. It's just like, it's not ingrained in me anymore to like cheer. Even when I go as a fan, it's hard to do.
Thank you. I see there's quite a few other anonymous questions that are coming in as well on Slido. And so just a reminder, if anyone wants to ask questions there too, you can do so anonymously. But one was a repeated theme so far in any data science discussion has been automating stuff. Any thoughts on why data science teams do these, not the app development team?
That's a good question. So sorry, can you repeat? Was there 2 questions in there? Like one about automation, and what was the like? Can you separate the question?
Yeah, definitely. And feel free to jump in if anyone wants to add more context if that was your question. But it says a repeated theme has been automating stuff. Do you have any thoughts on why data science teams do these and not the app development team?
That's a bad question for me. I guess working in the sporting, in the context of sports, like we're like a startup, right? We have, like I just got done saying, it's me and 2 other people. Like we're so small, we're all doing everything. So I don't even know if I can answer that question, to be honest. Like I don't have an app team. I wish I did, but I don't. We're all kind of helping each other out and doing things. So I'm going to pass on that one, only because I'm not knowledgeable, not because I'm skirting it, right?
I don't mind jumping in, Rebecca or Ian, to throw you a bone on like my opinion and how I've seen it. It's a very fair question, like extremely fair. And like most things, it depends. And context is really, really important. From my experience in working in a couple different sectors, I would group it in a few places. One, your typical developers, no offense to anyone on the board, please don't jump through my webcam. You don't know data. You know how to program. So those data automation pieces are a lot of times about automating data and processes rather than building front-end widgets and building UI and build like that kind of context. They can, how we're positioning it and how I've seen in other places, those developers optimize, they don't create that automation process, right? So it gets into that refinement piece. I see that as one area where it happens. And in other sectors, again, truth bomb, collective bargaining agreements and unions. So in a lot of organizations, IT shops or IT groups are unionized. So to have them jump outside of that role is a very difficult piece for upper management and executives to play in. So I'd see those 2 types of factors are really large aspects, which puts data science, data analytics teams in a good position because we program, we collectively, we program, and we think about process and we think about the data in the automation rather than, well, I have to have this button. It has to like UI, software development, conceptual ideas. I would leave that, and then as usual, I'll stop talking.
Ryan. Thanks, Ryan. I see there's a lot of great comments in the chat around that too, and talking about how if you want it to happen more quickly, a lot of times the data science teams will be the one to do that. And Alec, I love your comment there. My proof of concept Shiny apps have been alive for 2+ years now.
Yeah. The one thing I will add on that though, like what I'm trying to build towards with my team now is a little bit closer to what Ryan is just got done describing, which is like right now I might be doing, if I'm building an app, or let's just use that because everybody understands that, right? I might be doing like the data aggregation, building the features, things like that. And then I'm doing the modeling, then I'm doing the validation, then I'm doing this, then I'm, deploying the model on something or designing the app itself, then I'm doing UI, like I'm doing all those components right now. And so like, I'm not an expert necessarily, I might be an expert in one of those like 5 things. Like a perfect world, a high functioning data science team, in my opinion, and it's something I would aim to aspire to be, is that my engineers, the two guys that are two people I all have working in that role, like they're the experts at like feature engineering, and especially when you get big data scale, right? Like making that data, pulling that down and manipulating it as efficiently as possible, because once that loop comes back to production, it's going to have to come back to them anyways, usually, right? As new data is feeding in, they're going to be the ones that can optimize that portion of the process. And when I do it, it's probably going to be inefficient compared to what they can do, right? So that would be like the first step, is having them do it. Then the modeling is a second step. And then the front end UI, that's a whole different field, the people that have expertise in that. So I would say like what I'm trying to get to eventually is have all those things be experts, right?
Thank you, Ian. I see there are a lot of questions also going back to what we were talking about earlier around hiring. And there's a great question that came in anonymously that was, what should candidates look for or evaluate when considering a team or organization to join? And if you're hiring, how do you stand out to candidates?
I was hoping for this question because I know hiring is on everybody's mind, and it's been, I will admit, it's been years that I've been on the other side of the table, but I've done 3 iterations of hiring myself over an 8-year period on my team now. So I've seen this evolve, and the things I'll say are honestly, you'd be surprised how many people just don't take the time to like customize their resume. Like if there is some sort of like prompt, like I ask questions and they don't fill them out, or they don't take time, like they don't answer the questions that I'm asking. So like I can't even evaluate you because you're not doing what I'm asking you to do off the hop. So don't underestimate that part of that first stage, right? And then the next thing I would say is like really lead with what work you have done that will be most relevant to the position you're applying to, right? So I just did an interview this morning, a second round technical interview with one of my candidates, and she has great experience. Obviously I'm moving her along. I think she can do the work, and she drops something on me, and I'm like, wait a second, this is nowhere in your resume, and this is our second conversation. This is super relevant to the job you're trying to get with me, and you've left it completely off. Like, why? And if I didn't ask the right question, I would have never learned that about her. I'm like, okay, you need to put this somewhere very, very high. If it's not with me, the next person, because this is so crucial. You know, you almost missed it. And that piece of information you just gave me is like so relevant. So that would be like another piece of advice that I literally just learned this morning, is like this person was withholding a very key piece of information that she didn't think to put, to highlight. And I was just like, man, that would have been unfortunate for us to miss that. So that would be one. And then the last thing I want to tell people is that in sports, especially, I'll only speak to sports because that's my expertise. So I apologize for people that want industry, but maybe it's true for industry, is like in 2014, when I started, there was a couple of data science programs, and it was like, as I've done hiring, I was like struggling to find people that had skills, right? And now the applicants I'm getting is everybody has skills, because there's so many great programs. Like I just got done describing, there's so many different avenues to showcase your work. So how do I differentiate those people now, right? There used to be like, I would get 100 applicants and 5 had skills. So now I'm getting 100 applicants and 40 have skills. Okay, so now that gap is like, there's still, how do we differentiate amongst the 40 now should be your question. And then the answers I have to that are like projects and things that showcase specific to our industry, which is sports, right? Show me something that you could apply there. And then now we're going to get into like people that have domain knowledge. And that's probably true of industry too, is like, how can you develop your domain knowledge? You have all these great skills. You might work in industry, but I can't draw the parallel from your industry work to what you know about hockey now. And that might be, as you get down to the top 3 applicants, that might be the differentiator for you. So show me that you understand hockey, right?
Right. And Maisie, I see you just asked a a follow-up question there too, which I'm curious as well. So feel free to jump in too if you want to add anything. But 𝐦𝐨, I think you were asking around what was that information that they left off?
Yeah, like your candidate story. And yeah.
I don't want to
Sure.
blow that story up, but the point I'm trying to make is that she was working for another, I'll just call it organization, and there was a bottleneck in their process as a team, right? And she got tired of it. And so she said, I bought an iPad, I bought a book, I developed an app, a piece of software, and I run the software on a daily basis.
Oh, sorry about that. Mute Trevor. There we go.
And I run the software on a daily basis and upkeep it and do all this stuff. And I'm like, why are you telling me this now? Like, that should be the very first thing out of your mouth. Like, that's an amazing initiative to do. Like, there's so many things I could go on and on a half an hour about just that. But like initiative, she taught herself to do something. She developed code and software, executed it, start to finish, maintaining it, made the organization better. Like, how is that not the very first thing you're talking about?
Very cool.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. I think part of that question too is also for data science leaders themselves too. How can they also make the roles more appealing to a candidate? Like if somebody has maybe 5 roles or more that they're interviewing for.
Yeah, that's another interesting one for me because I did have some people apply across my positions. Another thing I did want to get across is now that teams are, when I say teams, I mean like analytics team groups within the sporting setting. They're growing now, right? So now it's not, when I started, it was like, okay, you're hiring one person and they need to do everything. And now I'm going to have a team of 6. So now I'm looking for people who has like expertise in a certain area, right? So showcase that you have not just a broad knowledge of all things, which is great, right? But I also want to know if you are joining my team, which I call like my group, where are you an expert? Where do you make us better? Like, where are you better than me? I want to hire people smarter than me. This is my philosophy, is like hire somebody smarter than me in a different area so that they can be the expert and tell me what to do or take ownership of that piece of our group, right? So showcase that you can become an expert in something. I don't know what that is. That needs to be something, the applicant decides. But if a lot of your work is just like general, that's going to be harder, I think, as we move along and the industry grows and grows and grows, to be a generalist when we have a lot of people that can do general things. Now we need people that can specialize in something and be impactful in an area.
It's really helpful perspective there. I see there's quite a few other questions in the chat too. And Sep, you just asked one, so I'd love to pass the mic over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Ian. Nice.
How you doing?
Happy New Year. I think at this point it's like 2 weeks to say that, right? But yeah, I was just curious about, I see that your progression within the organization was really to kind of, now you're director of analytics over there. What are some of the challenges that you find as you kind of have, I guess, leveled up? And if you don't mind sharing some of that, that'd be great.
Yeah. Again, this is like my 2022 goal for myself is like, and I'm being vulnerable and honest here when I say this, is like I started as a team of 1, and my prior role I kind of worked for myself a little bit independently as well, and then I hired 2 people that I have a group of 3. And to be honest, like I'm learning the management side of things as I'm going. I'm doing it on the fly kind of thing, and I do believe I need to get better at managing a team, a data science team. So that's what I'm going to focus on this year, is going, how do I go from 3 to 6 people that are a part of my group, including myself, right? How do we organize ourselves and optimize our group, right? And that's something I think is what I need to progress at next, is if anybody has good ideas, please drop me a note. Looking for high performing data science teams and how to manage them and make sure everybody is pulling in the same direction and feels empowered to do their job. So does that kind of answer your question? I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood.
No, that's great. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
And we can also make it more of a discussion too, if anyone else wants to jump in and have some feedback too.
Yeah, I guess to expand on that, Sep, is just like my progression has been like going from an individual contributor to now going to like a manager, right? And what that entails. And then I'm also part of like a management team that is doing more strategic type work and like, you know, short, medium, and long-term planning, like things like that. So it's like distinguishing those roles. That's where I get split in two, is like, it's not just the contributing data science work, it's the managerial strategic work as well.
Thank you. And I see there was a question earlier going back to the idea of the portfolio too, that someone had asked, what is more impressive to you for portfolios, a machine learning model or exploratory data analysis with tables, plots, different visual storytelling?
For me, I think it depends, you know, and it really depends. I've seen people just do excellent work in a variety of different domains. So I don't really have a great answer for that. I think it's just really showcasing like what you are passionate about and making it clear what sort of impact your work is going to have. Like where do I fit you on the team, right? If it's modeling, like here's my modeling work, and if I join your team, I'm going to be the expert in these areas, and here's the domain knowledge I have about hockey to apply that problem to this, you know, these tools. Use these tools to apply to that problem, right? So you got to show me that you can make that bridge, right? Is it like the technical stuff is all great, but I also need to know that you understand how to apply that to the right problem within the game of hockey, which, you know, that being said, the game of hockey is very complicated, more so than almost every sport. It's way more complicated, and I can go on about that, but it takes a lot of domain knowledge to understand our game. So I'm not saying everybody here needs to be a former player. I'm not a former player. I have no playing background at all. But I'm just saying you need to understand all the components of the game itself to be able to do the job.
For sure. And Trevor, I see you had a question you just put into the chat, and I'd love to have you ask that live. And if it's okay to maybe also ask about some of the process that you're going through internally and trying to showcase the importance of data science too.
Oh, Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So my question is a continuous question, right? So as you go up the ladder of moving from executing day-to-day projects to actually managing a team, it's just something that lingers in my mind, because in your current situation, that's how it is. But next year, it could be different. So I've always wondered, if I move so far away from the code, so far away from managing, as actually executing projects, do I lose my coding skills? And when I'm in a next environment where I need that skill set, is that going to be a difficult process to refresh myself? You know, it's just something I always toy with mentally. If you understand what I'm asking.
No, that is a great question. And I'm actually going to drop, if it's all right with everybody, I want to drop a post that I was reading last night into the comments right now. And again, this is on top of my head, so I was literally reading this. You guys can, anyone that wants to read, can you guys all see that, everybody?
Yep. I just
Yes.
Yeah, it's an excellent blog post. So you guys, it talks a lot about what your question was, so I'm not skirting it, but when somebody can say it better than you, I tend to just allow the better person to say it. But Trevor, I will say, like, I'm that's what 2022 is going to be for me, is is sorting out what you said. Am I moving further away from the code? Am I managing the team? Am I supporting people in the sense of creating tools for them to do their jobs better? Maybe that's some of it. Like whether that be for our users out there, are we creating more packages that are more internal packages that help everybody do things? Is it just setting expectations and managing the group through like processes, right? Like get version control type stuff? Is it templating all of our workflows so that it's clear that we're all working collaboratively, but we have a standard structure, right? So those are the really relevant questions to building a high functioning team, I think, and we've made strides in that over the last couple of years. I give a lot of credit to the two people on my staff for helping, to build that, because it's not just me, we're doing it collaboratively. I guess the piece of advice that I'm trying to follow is like, listen to the people that are working with me, right? Like, what do they want to see? What is relevant to them? Like, ultimately I have to have some non-negotiables, but other than that, like, they're doing the work. So I need to check in with them and see what makes sense too.
Yeah. So Ian, what I really want to find out, are you nervous about moving away from coding? That's kind of what I'm really want to pinpoint.
Nervous? No, I mean, I think you make time for things that are important to you, right? We all do that on our daily basis. So if exercise and health is important to you, you make time for it. You make time for it. You just do, right? Like it's either important to you or not, right? So if for me, if coding is something that I want to continue to maintain, I'm going to do it because I enjoy doing it. I'm going to find the time, whether that's at night, whether that's in the morning. I have 2 young kids. I mean, I'm juggling a lot of things, right? So it's just time management. And when you have a staff, it's, I've talked with my staff also about maybe having like, toying around with the idea of like office hours, like, okay, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'm like blocked off. Like that's where I'm going to do my work, my individual work, right? And everybody's going to do their individual work. And then 12 to 1:30 office hours. Come with me to any questions you might have, anything we need a decision on, or like it's not a clear path. We need to just choose the best way to go. So I've toyed with some of these ideas. Again, I'm open for anybody that has experienced this and has great things that they've seen in practice. Like, I'm all ears. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy trying to do my best here.
Okay. All right. So
thank you.
When you have a lot of good ideas, you're doing a lot of great brainstorming. The next step for me, this is Valerie Bataille. I'm do a lot of mediation and facilitation. I would suggest is having a strategic planning session for some of these. And it's great because you get buy-in, you get deliverables, you get time frames, you prioritize. But you're right at that point where that's kind of what I would recommend. If it's more of a scientific study and you have a lot of different partners, then it's really getting everybody where you have a lot of different expertise. Everybody should learn what each person's role is and responsibility. And then from there, you work on goals, deliverables, and it's really important that you're all answering the same question when you're doing data. Because if you get, that to me is the crux to quality with data, quality control. If you don't know what your question is, you're not going to get the answer you want. So for scientific studies, it's more, let's get everybody on board. Does everybody agree this is our question? And how are we going to get there? And what's everybody's role going to be? When it's more management and the team and what does everybody think is the priority for the year and what can we work on? That's more strategic planning session.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I see, Ryan, you have your hand raised as well, if you wanted to jump in on this topic.
Yeah, if I could just give a little piece to Trevor's question and add on to a bit of what Ian has said and the comments from Frank in there. This was top of mind for me like 12 years ago. It's when I really started to transition from a heavy technical role into management. It was geospatial, but technical is technical. Like it kind of doesn't really matter, like if it's engineering, if it's coding, if it's whatever, right? And I struggled with it for about 2 years. And I think it was because I was comfortable at it, right? And it's when you're really comfortable and you're successful, or I'm not anything like that, but like when you're good at something, it's kind of hard to want to leave it behind. But as I matured into my role and I became comfortable of like, what does it mean to be a manager? Like, what does it mean to lead? I have a bit of a philosophy that I like to carry around. It's the shield and spear. Like my role becomes less of tactfully putting out widgets. It's more enabling the people to be really successful. So if I try to measure my success by other people's success, and I know that might sound selfish, but it helps rationalize in my head. So if I can chop down and break down all the barriers for them, then they will be more successful. So that means my time, right? There's only so many hours in the day. So I sacrifice that technical to enable them to be further. However, I think it's still very relevant to keep your skills at some type of level, just for street cred in your team. Bringing new people on, having other people within there. If you can talk that language and they see you're like, oh, that's not just some dude in a suit. The barriers come down, and you can, not to say that we wear suits anymore, but you know what I mean? Like it just really helps your team, and you can have those conversations, and your communication goes up in a field that is technical. So I would say do it. And I fully agree. If you value it, you're going to make time in. Like I totally agree with that.
Yeah, like to expand upon that too is I think my approach also is to use a little bit of humility with my team and just go to them and say like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, teach me some, you know, like I see you've done something here, like teach me that. I want to learn that. Like, and I tell people that actively, that the guys on my team right now and people that I'm interviewing, I'm saying, I've said this briefly earlier and I mean it, like, I want to hire people smarter than me, because if I'm hiring people below my skill level all the time, then I'm constantly having to be the teacher where I'm trying to lift up 6 people myself. Whereas if I'm constantly hiring somebody that's an expert at something above me, then they're lifting me and my group up, the other people, right, in that one domain. And then the next person's doing that in their domain. And so we're spreading the expertise across, and we're teaching each other and working collaboratively as a group. Like the buck still stops with me, and like I'm still responsible for, you know, like you said, being the shield, as you said, for management or moving obstacles out of their way. And sometimes the obstacles that are in people's way, I've realized, is like me, you know, or processes, right? Like I'm putting things in their way in terms of like tasks, or making things inefficient for them to do their job better. So how do I learn to move those things out of the way, right? So those are kind of things I would like to add, I guess, on that.
Awesome. I love this discussion that's happening now, so I don't want to jump away from it, but Ian, I think this kind of answers your question from earlier, Ian Hunter. There's a lot of Ians on, I think, but around upskilling your team, and are you going to require any continuous learning per week or per month, or specific upskilling goals per year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think each case is unique, but I don't know about like, I don't know if I personally feel comfortable like mandating things. I just don't think that ever goes well at any aspect of life, is like mandate things. It's much, you want people to want to do that. So again, that would, to me, that would be like, what is that individual's goal? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they want to get better at? And then how can I direct them, or put things in their path to say like, hey, do you think this would be helpful for you to achieve your goal? Are you aware that this exists, right? I'm a little bit of in a unique position because we work, our organization is owned by Comcast Corporation. So we've been integrated into that corporate environment. So we're still operating as a team, but we're also corporate now employees. And so there's going to be some opportunities now moving in 2022 and beyond for us to access some of the corporate environment where there is a lot of training and classes and certificates that you can get through various different things. So that's something new that we've never had. And now how can we leverage that? How can anybody that I need to make them aware that they can do that, and provide them the time and the space to learn, right?
For sure. And it looks like there's a lot of great suggestions too in the chat around what other teams do too. And Evan, if you wouldn't mind jumping in and sharing that example, I think it'd be really helpful too.
Here, can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Okay, good. I got to apologize to the team. I'm on my work computer and it's government, and so I don't have a web camera on it, so you don't get graced by the mess that's in my office right now. But obviously, I'm in the government, and so we kind of have to kind of balance meetings, because government, nothing gets done without meetings and red tape. But as I was kind of looking through the blog post that you had in there, and trying to find a balance between how do you kind of inform the team, both on some professional development kind of things. And that's kind of, in my post in there, I kind of mentioned we do a brown bag, which is up to an hour. And that can be on, hey, I found a new cool way to do something, to, hey, here's this new example from like 3 years ago. Hey, XGBoost is cool. And one of our guys that has spent a lot of time on there kind of went through and kind of did a quick discussion on that for us, to some additional work that we've done with some customers. Actually was our topic yesterday. And then in our case, we do what I call it a project update. And so that's like a quick 30-minute, we've got two time spots a week on there. Sometimes we use them, sometimes we don't. And that's kind of at all levels of a project. You could just be starting something. You're like, hey team, this is what I think the task is. This is who I think the customer is. This is the data I think we need to be using, all the way to, hey, this is a closeout. Like, we officially handed this over. It is whatever the desired end result is. It could be an app. It could be a Flex dashboard. It could be a report. It could be, hey, the answer is 42. Hey, this is kind of what we've closed out here. This is what we learned. In my position, I'm our project management chief. And so my questions then is like, okay, cool. So have you documented the code? Is it the final information is on the GitLab page? Have we closed the loop? Is there anything else that we need to kind of circle back on with the customer? Have we answered all of the questions? And more often than not, then it's like, oh, hey, from the customer, can you also do this? Like, well, we probably can, but now we probably need a second project on here, because that's something called scope creep. And sorry, this is a cool project for you, but maybe this team has to pivot to something else. So hopefully that was a little insight on kind of how we're doing things to some level.
Definitely. Thanks, Evan. Frank, I see you raise your hand too.
Yeah, so as Evan was speaking, he had mentioned meetings, and it got my mind thinking. And something really effective that I've done with my team in the past 6 months that I think is probably relevant for everyone here. Every month we've done basically a progress update. So there's an expectation on my team that you have to be upskilling, you have to be learning. I don't care what it is, honestly, right? Do you want to learn JavaScript? Do you want Python, R, like whatever it is, you just got to be in that learning mindset, because I think that's when you uncover like kind of unexpected benefits of this stuff. So every month we have an hour-long session. I have 12 people on my team now. And right, if you do that math, that's not a lot of time for each person to give an update. It's really quick. So each person gets like 4 minutes to update everybody else on what they're doing. So they have to have a pretty concise visual. Their story has to be pretty concise. And I found a lot of benefits coming out of this. First of all, everyone sees that everyone else is learning. So the laggards are like, oh no, I really got to get my act together. The other thing is they have to practice being concise, because when you go to stakeholders to tell a story, you don't have a lot of time or attention, right? So they get to practice that. And then it's probably one of the only meetings on my calendar through the month where I see people getting really excited about it, because we have that speed rather than being on another one of those calls where you're like, silence, everyone feels a little bit bored. It's like one of those high energy, like quick turnover meetings. And we're even like using that the quickness and testing it out with some of our stakeholders in reverse showcase meetings. So that's been like, in terms of upskilling, one of the most successful routines I've put in place.
Super helpful. Thank you, Frank. I'm doing a bad job of managing the comments in the chat right now. I'm sorry. But I just want to go over to a few other questions earlier from Slido too. And one anonymous one, Ian, was, around the kind of data that you work with. Can you elaborate on different data and work that you focus on in sports? Is it specific to ticket sales, player statistics, or free agency, Moneyball-esque?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that one more time?
So it's just, the question was just elaborating more on the different data and work that you're focusing on right now. So is it more specific to ticket sales or player statistics or free agency?
Yeah, that's a good distinction. So a professional sports team is kind of split into two business units. You have the business side, which is ticketing, market segmentation, marketing, all that stuff you guys, most companies have, right? And then we're the hockey, I work in the hockey side of the business, which is my boss is the general manager. I work with the coaching staff, scouts, people on that side of things. Really the easiest way I tell people that ask me, what exactly do you do? It's like, we look for any way to use data, to make a better decision. So that could be, something on the coaching staff. It could be something with our strength and conditioning group. It could be something with, drafting players. It could be player acquisition. It could be, is a player on our team, how is he going to age? What's his production going to be like moving forward? So it's kind of endless. It's just anything related to the team that could potentially make us better or help us make a more efficient decision, add another piece into that decision-making process. We are not the only piece. I don't want to make that, I want to make that clear. We are just one piece of a cog, right? That there's scouts involved, there's other stakeholders that are all putting in information to one big piece that ultimately a decision gets made from.
Can I ask to expand a bit on that? Because you just mentioned there's so many different pieces. So how do you all work together? Like, how do you work directly with the scouts?
I guess it's just being involved in the meetings. I think we have like designated meetings, right, throughout the year. Like next week, we have our midterm amateur scouting meeting. Where the scouts will meet and they'll just say, okay, we're halfway through the season, heading into this upcoming 2022 draft. What are the players of note? Who's trending up? Who's trending down? Which players are we concerned about? Which players need more coverage? From a scouting standpoint, it's always like it's an eyeballs business, right? And you have to see them to make an evaluation. Sometimes a person gets hurt. Sometimes they don't play. Sometimes they're suspended, So sometimes it's like, which guys do we need to go get more on? So those meetings being a part of it, it's helpful for me. I don't necessarily contribute much to them. I can at times, but why it's important and relevant to my role is that I need to know what the scouts are saying and what they're interested in and what their problems are. I'm really having a hard time on this guy. He got hurt last year as a 16-year-old, so we don't have any book on him. He's playing as a 17-year-old in this league with these players, and he's struggling with that decision as a scout. So what I can do as a data analyst is go to him after the fact and say, hey, if I could provide some information on similar players doing similar things at similar times in that league, would that be helpful? Yeah, man, that would be awesome. Can you get that to me? I can help them in that manner, right? So that's where the collaboration is. And a lot of times I think the consulting aspect, like some consultants that are probably on this call, is just like listening. Like, what are people talking about? What are the issues, right? And then using my knowledge of the data we have within our possession is, where can I go to that archive and pull that piece of information down, package it up, and get it back to them so they can feel more comfortable in their evaluation. Is that helpful? I don't know. Sorry.
No, that is really helpful.
Yeah.
When you say package that up to them, how do you share that with them?
It could be a variety of ways. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's a text message. Sometimes it's a report. Sometimes it's, a lot of when I talk with my staff and I'm interviewing people, like a lot of times, a lot of our job is preparing for meetings, if that makes sense. So we get in these meetings, right? And all of a sudden somebody's questioning, okay, should we acquire this guy, or do we want to make this trade, or what do we think about this player? We need to answer that question right then and there. What sort of tools can we build prior to enable us to answer those questions at least as best we can in that moment? So a lot of the work is like preparing. So that might be an app, that might be a dashboard, that might be part of our website that we have. It might be something like that. But you might be working 3 months, like, why am I doing this? Nobody's looking at it. And then we get into a meeting and somebody's asking a question. You're like, oh, I've been building that. Here it is. We put it up and everybody's looking at it and we're interacting with it. So for us, I had this mistake originally, thinking that like I'd be in a position where I could just give this tool to people. And oftentimes they don't want to do that, right? They just want to see it. They want to see you, the expert, kind of work through it and showcase all the different aspects of the information to them. And sometimes explain it to them, what they're looking at. And then they say, oh, that makes a ton of sense. And then they have questions on that and you can work through those. So it's just opening up that box and having more productive conversations. Because if everybody remembers, like back in the old days, you know, somebody would ask a question, right? And then you'd say, oh, I could answer that. Let me get back to you in a week, right? Like, so how valuable is that to that person? They've forgotten the question a week later. They have, or they've moved on or whatever, right? We want to answer that in the moment is the best way to describe a lot of what we do also.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective too. And it's important to think, like, I guess in my head, I'm like, oh, people just want to create this dashboard or this like application and just give them that and it's the answer, but that's not really how it always works. I'm going through just to see which questions I had missed from earlier. But Bruno, I know you had a question towards the beginning around like data and marketing as well, and asking if Gritty was a result of this. Do you want to jump in, Bruno?
Yeah, sure. So Gritty jumped on the hockey mascot scene and basically destroy every other mascot. So did you have any hand into like crafting this piece of marketing flyers, propaganda, using data or social media analysis? Or
no, that is the brainchild of someone else, unfortunately. But it's amazing how he's taken on this whole life. It's at some point someone will write a book about it, I'm sure. I'll leave it at that. And it'll be, I'm sure people will be reading about it in case studies and Harvard Business Review or something at some point. And I'll be reading it too, because I have no idea what went into that. And I'd be interested to hear that as well. So I have the same interest as you.
Thanks, Bruno. Mike Smith, I see I had asked a question earlier as well around if it's any easier to influence decisions in sports rather than, or harder compared to other organizations. Would you want to jump in, Mike, with your perspective there?
No, go ahead. That's great. I'm just interested to know if, you know, I guess all organizations, you're trying to influence up to managers. And, you know, managers are either, you know, going to accept the data-driven analytics or go with gut feel. But just if you have any experience of differences between doing that in a sports context versus any other.
Yeah, I can't really speak to like outside of the sporting world because I admittedly like don't have a lot of industry experience outside of this world that I'm in. But what I've arrived at as my own mental model is like people are people. This is like still a people's business. You're still interacting with team members. So whether you're in the sports or you work at Target or Walmart or whatever Fortune 500 company, the people still have the same motivations. They still have the same personality traits, right? So I don't know if it's easier or harder. I think it's just people, right? Like it's teamwork. It's getting people, making people in the group feel like they're heard and that their input is valued, even when that decision might go against what you're recommending. It doesn't mean it's not valued. Sometimes it's on the contrary, right? But in sports, there's also an element of like, there are things, and I would put this out to all the modelers, right? Let's make this about data science, okay? When we build a model, what does everybody know is that we have things that are in the model. So there's like the known knowns and there's the known unknowns. So there's things that we know exist, but they're not in the model, right? And no model accounts for everything. So when somebody's making a decision about how do I say this? They make a decision that is influenced by something else over here. Sometimes it's not in the model, and I know it's not in the model. So like, what would that be? Like somebody might be saying, what is he even talking about, right? So something like that might be saying, hey, here's this player. We want to acquire him. He has all these great results. He's going to project out nicely. And then my GM goes down and gets the guy's medical file from the team that he's currently playing on, and he has some sort of degenerative issue, and that there's a high likelihood that this person's going to have health problems, you know, and that might affect his performance. So like, that's not in my model. That's not in my report. That's not in my evaluation. That's not in anything I'm saying. It's a known unknown. And when you come to me and say, hey, we're worried about this, I'm not upset about that. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. I don't have that information. Otherwise I can model it, right? So there's an element of that. Like, what are the known unknowns, and being okay with that, right?
I realize an hour just went by very quickly, so I just want to be conscious of your time if you had to jump right to another meeting. Okay. I'm
okay if you guys want to, if everybody wants to keep going, it's fine. Otherwise, awesome. I'm probably tired of hearing me talk.
No, there's a lot of other questions. Thank you. One question that came up earlier, I just want to make sure to ask, was around like, what does a technical interview look like for your team, or how do you approach interviews?
Yeah, so I've tried to do different iterations on this, but the one I'm currently using right now, and again, this is evolving over time, and I'm sure there's better ways to do it. Like, my personal opinion is like, hiring is so difficult. I don't think any of us are trained in that. I don't know if there is training. So we're all doing our best in a complicated process. But for me, what I boil it down to is like, can you do what you say you can do, right? I need to have some sort of test that shows me that you can do what you say you can do. So it doesn't need to be any more complicated or intensive than that. And I'll give everybody an example. So not this time, but last time I hired, I got to a second interview with a group of people, and I had a coding challenge that I gave people, I don't know, 24 or 36 hours or something to do, return it back to me. And there's a variety of reasons why I do that. I got down to the time I was supposed to speak with this individual, and the person sent me an email 1 hour in advance and just said, I have nothing. I could not do the exercise. I told you I could do X, Y, Z, and either I overestimated myself, or he didn't say he was lying, but he basically couldn't do what he said he could do. So I avoided a very large and costly mistake had I gone on to just trust that person. And I'm not saying it was done intentionally or that this person was trying to fool me, but I'm just saying we have to have some sort of checks and balances that people could do what they say they can do, right? And then I just want to see the depth of your work. Like, how far do you take things down? Are you just a simple add two numbers together? That's fine. We'll get to that in a second. But can you show me some techniques that I think that you could bring to the table, right? And then the third component of that is there's no perfect candidate, and everybody's going to come in with their different strengths and weaknesses, right? And by doing this coding challenge, I'm learning about you as a candidate to say, where do I need to upskill this person? Where do I need to spend time with this person on day one? Prior to this person starting, I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to say, this person needs to get better in X, Y, Z, or after a certain number of months, I want to circle back with them and say, hey, I think you can utilize these skills a little bit better and make you more efficient, or can excel your code writing ability, or whatever it might be. Or maybe it's somebody on my team, like, hey, this person on my team I think would really help you in this area. So by showing me a little bit about what you can do, that's not to eliminate you as a candidate. It's more or less to see, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How can I help you? How can I upskill you eventually?
Thank you, Ian. That's really helpful. So I know that comes up quite a bit in terms of like technical interviews, and sometimes when people are asking maybe far too much of someone versus just needing to make sure that they have that component.
Yeah, I've read the tech world is notorious for whiteboarding and all that stuff and putting people. I don't think that's for me, coming from a sport background, the whole idea of practice in sport is to simulate things that you will see in a game, because that's your job, to play games. So if we expect you to perform at a high level in a game, we need to simulate that situation, slow it down, help you practice and get better and get the synapses moving quickly and firing quickly, right? That's the whole idea of practice, is to slow things down and then gradually build up and up and up and translate exactly what you did in practice into a game. If I'm having you do something in practice that you're not doing in a game, why is that relevant? Why should we be spending our time doing that? So I kind of see the idea of making somebody code something on a whiteboard, while I see some benefits to it, at what point in the game, this game is you working on my team, are you ever going to stand in front of a whiteboard and do something like that? That's just not how we work. So why would I make somebody do that? Just one man's opinion.
Yeah.
I know there's people that are going to argue this till the death, but just one person's.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. But in saying
Mike
that,
agreeing in the chats too.
Yeah, but in saying that, when I do give them a coding challenge, I do put them under a time limit, and I do tell them it's coming ahead of time, because that is the job. It's not me not being fair to them or putting them under pressure for my own fun. That's not it. The job is it's Friday night and we're playing Saturday, and our coach says, "Hey, I'm struggling with lineup combination or some problem he might have, right? I'm wondering who should be going in. This person's hurt. Like, I'm struggling on who I should put in, or lineup decision, right? What can you give me on that?" I have 12 hours to get him that information, the best of my ability, right? So that is the job. So I have to put people also under that pressure of like saying, okay, I need to work through this problem. I need to come to a minimal viable product to give this person that can give them information quickly, because sometimes we are put under the gun in terms of getting somebody something before a game. There is a deadline. That might be different than like industry, where we're working on quarters or long projects and things like that. No, we play tomorrow. I need this before the game, right? Like, so.
Yeah, definitely. And so I appreciate how over the past few months, this has really started to feel like a community of people and seeing people come every week is awesome too. And Trevor, and I know you and I were kind of just chatting earlier today. I think you said you have to leave, but Trevor, you were talking a little bit about how to present to your team on the benefits of data science, and maybe learning from someone else in the community who has shown this to their own executive leadership. And I just wanted to see if you wanted to pose that question to the group before you run.
Yeah, so just to let you guys know what is happening on my side. So we are in the process of building out a company-wide dashboard. So I'm in Jamaica, so we call the dashboard Jamaica 360, as in 360 degrees, because the idea is to give users the ability to see the entire business instead of looking at just their side of the business, because that leads to silos, and we actually see that impacting the results that we get in a negative way, right? So that's one. Two, what we're trying to do is democratize information or data, because what we want to do right now is to ensure that everybody is data literate and that everyone can analyze their own information to an extent. Because what we have now is a bottleneck where when people need data, they have to come to my unit. And of course, that is inefficient. It slows down data, slows down decision-making process. So what we're trying to do is upskilling the entire organization and also help people in terms of consuming their own data. The fortunate thing for me is that, which is not typical with data persons necessarily, is that I sit on the senior management team. So all I need to do is to convince the general manager, and she's definitely on board in terms of where we need to go. But but your thoughts, what I would really welcome is your thoughts in terms of how best to do it. I've been reading a lot in terms of what we need to do and some ways of democratizing information, some ways of sharing information. So any thoughts on that would be welcomed.
Is that a question for me? I'm sorry, or is that to the group?
It's in the entire group, actually.
Okay,
Anyone who wants to respond, that would be great.
I'll jump in a little bit. I had that problem at a previous role because our audience was the city of Toronto, so 3 million people plus around the world. And I was leading the open data team. So how do you upscale citizens to use data to be able to do transparency and things like that, right? And I talked a little bit about before to other people. So fast forward so you don't have to go through that painful conversation is we decided to make it easy for people based on where they work. So rather than trying to force people to speak our language, i.e. the data science language, be like machine learning engineers, all that kind of stuff, let's not be elitist and say, well, you can't work in Excel. You can't work there. You have to come to us. No. If it's all about people making decisions and not discrediting their domain knowledge that they bring to the table, we'll let them work wherever they want, right? Don't tell me how to work. I won't tell you how to work. So what we did is we started to make data access, that being the raw material, that being the gold, so to speak, easy for anyone no matter where they were. So we made tool sets, plugins for really simple things that most people used in which would be our customers, education people, in Google Sheets. So they could access all the data that we had via Google Sheet plugin. We made an R package for our R package people. We made Python libraries for our Python users, and we made a plugin for geospatial users in open source. So one thing that we did about that was making it easy for people to get it. Because what we heard from hundreds of people is, I'm not a data scientist. I don't have a stats degree. I don't even know what a CSV is. So if I don't know what that is, the barrier of entry might as well be $1 billion. They just can't do it. It's too scary. So if we make it easier for them, that was one way to get them up the ladder. And then we heavily invested in writing blog stories that were fun. Now, I air quote fun. It's not Disney and Pixar fun, but like not being like a PhD thesis, right? It's not being jargon and taking that away, taking that burden and cost away, making it so that the entry level for them was easier and doing like using fun words, analogies, connecting it to stuff, swearing with symbols instead of letters. So like you just stuff like that. So I think it really boils down to like know your audience and having empathy for them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump on Ryan's sentiment there. One thing that translates what he said to, he was talking about data science to citizens, I guess, or less data sophisticated people, right? Is like using their terminology, right? And so like in sports, the one thing that we try to do also is by being a part of those meetings with the scouts and with the coaching staff at times is like, what are the terms that they are using for certain things, right? Like I might have a metric or something that we've developed over here, but if it's as simple as just putting it in a language that they're already speaking instead of me having to teach them a new language, isn't that like an easy solution to, we all talk about like buy-in and getting people. Sometimes it's just we create we meaning like the data professionals, we create an artificial barrier, an unnecessary artificial barrier between us and the end user, and then we blame them sometimes for not meeting us, right? Where I think the easy solution is like understanding and being aware that could happen, and try to head that off ahead of time and say like, can we put this in their words so that they'll instantly get it, they'll pick it up a lot quicker, right? And sometimes just changing that terminology is really the key to getting quote buy-in or people to understand it, right?
Thank you.
I love that. I know we're quite a bit over on time now, so I just want to ask one last question, if that's okay. So you shared that awesome blog post, which I realized was from Alex Gold from the RStudio team as well.
I forgot it was too. I was not plugging RStudio.
No, I appreciate it because I didn't see it. Now I have to reach out to Alex about that. But I was just curious, are there other resources or if it's books or podcasts or things that you'd recommend to us all.
There's a few.
You can send them to me later too, and I can include them in the recording as well.
Yeah. There's a couple, but I'm kind of blanking on the whole list right now. I'm like,
yeah, no worries.
But yeah, I'll put a couple in there if people want to get more involved. There's obviously a lot of like great work in the public domain too. It's amazing the work people do, again, showcasing their skills or doing blog posts kind of things like Ryan was talking about, is just show how data can be fun and how can it be useful and things like that. Like showcase your thinking too. Like that stuff is interesting for people to see. And those are obviously, like I said, the missing components, right? When you get down to everybody has the skills, what's going to differentiate people, right?
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for chatting with us. And if people ever have follow-up questions or just want to connect with you, is LinkedIn the best place?
Sure. Yeah, you could do that. I think I have all my stuff on there. Another piece of advice too for maybe the younger people on this call is like, if you're going to reach out to somebody, just be direct about what you're asking. Like sometimes I can't figure out even what people contact me, and I just move past it because I don't know what they're asking. And instead of going back and forth 6 times about figuring out what they want or what their question is, take some time to think about what you're asking. Like be direct, be clear, and then I can answer you quickly, right? Because I don't have. You might think you're one person emailing, why isn't this person responding? But if I get 100 of them, it's hard to get back to 100 people. So the more direct you could be, the quicker I can get back to you. And you could be one of the ones out of those 100 that I actually can try to help. I do want to help, trust me, I do, but I need to know how, and without having to weed through innuendo, I guess.
For sure. That's really important too, especially as I'm sure you get a lot of messages on LinkedIn too.
Yeah, please no stop and chats. Please no, do you have 10 minutes? Because again, it's 10 minutes and that's not a lot of my time. It's not. But if I get 100, 10 minutes, that adds up. So it might be better just ask one simple question that you want to know, right? And if that's something that you prefer to do, I can help that in that way. But outside of that, it's just a time situation,
Yeah. And sorry, one other thing is I was actually going to repost some of the job postings, and I think I maybe have old links, or it says they're no longer up.
Yeah. I'm down the rabbit hole already on that. So I've turned them off just because it gets overwhelming. I haven't hired anybody. So if you are really adamant and you want to insert yourself, I'll make a pop culture reference here. My wife sometimes watches The Bachelor, right? And like they're 10 shows in and they introduce somebody. Like I always think that's a terrible idea for that show. But if you want to be that person that comes on mid-show, send me an email.
Or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for chatting with us. I really appreciate it. And good luck today. I think you have a game.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.